Let us call the April 2017 meeting of the Spokane Regional Health District Board of Health to order. We have a quorum this afternoon, so let's begin with a roll call of our board members with Ms. Stratton.
Here.
Karen Stratton, council member, City of Spokane.
Here.
Thank you. There you go.
Sam Wood, Spokane Valley City Council. Is that how we're supposed to do this?
I guess.
Josh Kearns, Spokane County Commissioner.
Here, Lori Kinnear, Spokane City Council.
And for me?
Yeah.
Mike Munch, Spokane Valley City Council.
Tony Smith, Spokane Regional Health District.
Susan Boyce, an appointed member.
Chuck Abner, appointed member.
Kevin Freeman, City of Millwood.
Bob Lutz, appointed member.
Michelle Fossum, legal counsel.
And Cassandra, reporting secretary.
Thank you. Now is the period in our agenda which we will accept citizen input. Let's see what we have this afternoon. We have 4 citizens that have been asked to present this afternoon, provide input. We ask that you limit yourself to 3 minutes. And we've had Mr. Beggs join us from City of Spokane. Let's begin with Jacqueline. Also, please remind you to state your name and address for the record.
Okay, my name is Jacqueline Gallion. My address is 4108 South Conifer Court, Spokane Valley, Washington. I also asked before you start the time that please don't interrupt me. Okay, let me just get through this because it's a tough one. Okay, I'm ready. My original intent in attending this meeting today was to correct the numerous misrepresentations in Dr. Luber's vaccine cheerleading session last month. However, something has occurred that is much more important that I want to address with you. On April 19th, one of my son's friends took a gun and shot himself in the head. He explained in a letter why he felt that this was the only way to end his suffering. And he said that the pressure of trying to keep his schoolwork up to the grades needed to gain entrance into his target college was too much to bear. Teen suicide is disturbingly common, listed as the 2nd or 3rd cause of death, and school pressure is a huge part of that stress. Teens succumb to this pressure all the time. He had the additional burden of being part of the useless mumps exclusion and was kept from school for 19 class days. The schools failed him, and I will be addressing them too. But they claim that they must follow the health department's recommendations. The board heard sincere, honest, direct testimony to the distress the exclusion was causing to exempt students and their families. The board was also informed that due to the nature of this outbreak, there was no public health benefit to be achieved by excluding exempt students. Our children are under tremendous pressure in their schoolwork because the exclusion spanned finals week. On return, they were expected to pass tests for which they were not fully prepared, on top of catching up assignments. And added to that, they are saddled with the threat that at any time another mumps case could emerge and put them back out of school for several more weeks. I know that my son would have been devastated if the exclusion had prevented him from playing baseball. And his friend was a wrestler. The exclusion started during the season and he must have been forced off the team, compounding the academic disappointments. Make no mistake that the misery this boy experienced is intentional. The professional organizations, our health office officials, belong to a written, adopted policy to discourage exemptions used by making it as difficult as possible for families to exercise their legal right to exempt. Exclusion is one of their most offensive tactics. Their strategy is to hold the students' education hostage. They stigmatize, ostracize, and isolate exempting students, to harass and coerce them to abandon their personal, philosophical, or religious objections and submit to the health department's vaccine agenda. It is sadly ironic that in pretending the exclusion was helping stop the spread of near harmless infection, that the health department and education system potentially contributed to a suicide mortality, which is a real and legitimate threat to teens. Our school and health department personnel focused on vaccine compliance, and they overlooked this as a potential risk outcome to a vulnerable student. Where's the study to show that this is a safe practice? Spokane Public Health Department is promoting exclusions of students when this is known to increase the risk of teen suicide. If this boy had not been excluded for a month, it is entirely possible his stress level could have remained manageable, and he could have survived his sophomore year of high school. It would have just been a tough year, and he could have looked back during graduation and said it was touch and go there for a while, but I made it. Instead, I will be attending his funeral Saturday. And shame on you for hijacking this outbreak to push your vaccine zealotry. Thank you.
Next on our agenda is Carol Fallon?
I'm Carolyn Gallion, 21502 East Lakeview Branch Road, Lotus Orchards, 99027. I want to address Washington State's Health Department. You're full of MDs, MPHs, and PhDs, but nobody in this brain trust had the common sense to ask the question, could kicking kids out of school and off their sports teams, out of their bands, taking them away from their friends, possibly have a negative effect on their mental and psychological health? And if these experts aren't bright enough to figure out that their own, they could Google it, and every single citation is how damaging exclusion is and how it should be avoided at all costs. And then there's the logical follow-up. Suicide is the second leading cause of teen mortality. Sad kids are more likely to commit suicide than happy kids. Exclusions make kids sad. Since exclusions make kids sad, maybe exclusions are a greater danger to students than mumps. I had the mumps. I just can't get over this. It's stupid. Which was never even the top 100 threats to kids. You have the answer right here. You can play games and rationalize, well, we can't be certain, but this is about it, as obvious as it gets. For the PhDs, let me walk you through it. The boy wrote, I am doing this because my grades are dropping. The boy was excluded for a month. Does exclusion make grades go up or down? The next question is, what do you do now? Is exclusion still more important than these students' education and well-being? Are you going to wait for another tragedy for confirmation? There are exempt kids at Central Valley who have been excluded for months. What if they're another kid as desperate as my grandson's friend? You have had students and families who stood at this exact podium and tried to warn you directly how damaging exclusion is, and you ignored them. Has the health department done any assessment on how the exclusion is impacting these students? Do you have any idea or how many other students might be at high risk? Where's the science to prove that excluding high school students is safe? Where's the policy sheet outlining the procedures for the best practices of excluding a child to minimize the impact and risk? If there isn't any science showing this is safe, how do it safely and a plan for the best way to do it ensure student well-being, then aren't you engaging in reckless endangerment? because I am unaware that you have done anything other than cut these kids loose to fend for themselves, I am forced to conclude that the student safety is of no concern of any of you. In fact, instead of minimizing impact, you do everything you can to maximize negative impact, to make exempting as intolerable as possible in the hope that families will stop using them. Teen suicide clusters are a CDC-recognized known phenomenon. You have placed dozens of children at high risk. These children now have this behavior to potential model. What is your response going to be? We want an answer. I'm sorry, I'm just so sad. A boy died. He couldn't get into the college of his dreams because his grades dropped. Really? Freaking mumps.
Next, we have Benita Ott.
Good afternoon. I would like to thank you for the time you have given me to speak to you today. I came to your meeting just a few weeks ago to speak to you in regards to the mumps outbreak. You might remember my son, who was excluded from school, also spoke to you. That same day, you also had a doctor come in to speak. He stated that there is no aborted fetal tissue used for the vaccines. I wish this were true. Since the mumps outbreak, I have seen several documentaries regarding vaccines in which this issue, among many others, including toxins, injuries, and even death from the vaccines themselves. I wanted to know myself, not secondhand, not from a doctor's mouth, but from the insert itself, which comes from the vaccine. What are the ingredients in the MMR vaccine? I was refused this information at a doctor's office and ended up at a pharmacy where the pharmacist found an insert out of the MMR package to give to me. As you can see, the print is quite small. For your convenience today, I have provided you with an enlarged copy of the ingredient section of this insert. Due to my limited time, I will just address the fetal tissue aspect. If you look under the description, you will find RA273, strain of live attenuated rubella virus propagated in WI38 human diploid lung fibroblasts. During an outbreak of rubella, it was in the 27th aborted baby that they found the rubella virus. WI38 is the name given to an aborted female baby fetus. Please find the attachments regarding these for your review. As you can see, there's no denying the fact that the MMR vaccine is made using human fetal tissue. Rather than call the doctor a liar, I would hope to think that he, just like many other doctors, is just repeating what he has been told rather than researching the facts for himself. I do, however, believe he was brought in to give you misinformation. I find it terribly wrong that my child was excluded from school because we would not have him injected with the MMR. We even gave him the choice since he is 16, and he researched it and said that he didn't want it, and even added the fact that the CDC is protected from the whistleblowers. He also is disgusted by the fact that he would be required to have aborted fetal DNA injected into his body to mix with his own DNA in order to go back to school. Our son followed the protocols for mumps given to us by our doctor, but because it is naturopathic, it was not accepted. Our son has always been very healthy and a 4.0 student. I was talking to my son the other day about the boy from U-High who had also been excluded during the mumps outbreak. The boy had become so overwhelmed with trying to get caught up and the changes that were caused to his grades that he reached despair and took his life. My son, the strong drumline and football player, broke down and with tears streaming down said, "What if that was me?" I hugged him and told him many things, and that he is more important than grades, and just to do his best, and that sometimes being morally right is hard. How can we live in a free country if we cannot even choose what goes into our bodies? What is our freedom to choose if our freedom costs you your education? And what about bullying? Many kids commit suicide because of bullying. Is bullying any different if you are being bullied out of school by the Spokane Regional Health Department? The packets I have put together for you contain supporting documents. I would also like to invite you to the conference on May 20th. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Josh Karnowitz. Karnitz. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Josh Karnitz. Address is 4108 South Conifer Court, Spokane Valley, Washington. Okay, when a family loses a loved one, there can sometimes be consolation in the loss if it is unavoidable, or if it occurred in the service of helping others. We know for certain from his own words that this boy's actions were driven by academic failure. We are not certain, however, how big an impact the exclusion had on him, but we can state with certainty it did not help or benefit him in any way. If the exclusion was the precipitating factor, how important was it? Was a critical public health objective achieved? Did the boy's exclusion somehow make the school safer for attending students? No. This exclusion had zero potential to interrupt the transmission of mumps in this community. 97% of the mumps cases have been in fully vaccinated individuals. 75% of the vaccinated infections are in a specific ethnic social group who don't exempt and therefore have unrestricted attendance at school. They are infecting each other off school grounds, in social and family exposures. The same situation is happening statewide and nationwide, where almost all the cases are in this group and their close social contacts. The health department has known this all along. There was no chance of the exclusion of exempt students to interrupt an outbreak that was centered in a differing population. The true purpose of the exclusion was to harass exempting families to get them to stop using exemptions. It appears they pushed this boy too far. How many other kids have been improperly excluded for no good reason or are approaching their personal limit? The excluded kids who are back in school are now not only dealing with the hassle of trying to put their school careers back together, but facing the grief caused by the loss of their friends dying in a tragic manner. Thank you.
And lastly, we have Dina Tucker.
My name is Dina Tucker. I live at 15604 East 21st Court, Spokane Valley. I have 3 points I would like to address with this exclusion order. My daughter has been excluded and is now back in school, and we are trying to recover from that situation. During this process, we have investigated different routes and different knowledge bases to understand how this works and why this has happened. My first point that I would like to understand is to understand why the health officer in charge of being made in charge of these decisions is inaccessible and non-responsive to the public he affects. When messages are not returned by a public officer who is responsible for making the decision that affects the community and is non-responsive to that community, that is irresponsible and abuse of power. Secondly, I'd like to know where the communication between that health officer and the superintendent of the school has happened according to state law. When speaking to the superintendent of the school, and he has stated that there has been no communication to that effect for how this affects his schools and his students. That is an abuse of power. And lastly, I'd like to know why, when the few mumps exempt excluded kids are such a minuscule population to those who are vaccinated, and those who are vaccinated are now getting the disease according to your own records and perpetuating this mumps epidemic or quote outbreak. I would like to know how that is not discriminatory to the excluded students. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our citizen input. So next we have, what? No, we got that. We are good. Let's see. I want to make sure that doesn't go off. Next is our chair report, which is we are proceeding apace with the health officer recruitment. We interviewed 4 candidates, and on May 5th, we'll have a follow-up interview with 2 of the remaining candidates. At that point, after input from the hiring committee, Tony Smith will make his decision, and we will hopefully have a health officer selected by very shortly, sometime after that. So by middle of May, we should have a health officer in place. As many of you may note, we will have an upcoming vice chair vacancy. Ms. O'Quinn is relinquishing her commissioner's position, and so we will need to select a new vice chair from this group. It is important to note we'll probably take nominations at we will take nominations at the next meeting. The person who will be taking this role as vice chair will end up being the chair in 2018. This is my last, by the bylaws, this is my last time of being chair, so that person will move directly into the chair role beginning in 2018. So at the next meeting, we will be soliciting nominations from our board for a vice chair to move into this role. And lastly, the executive committee is reviewing the evaluation plan and process for the administrator. As the administrator will be is now reporting directly to the board, we will be creating an evaluation plan for the administrator, and that plan will be brought forward to the board in general at the May meeting for review and discussion. Any questions? Mr. Munch.
When we have our own health officer, will he be part of the board meetings?
Yes. Yes.
Perfect.
Other questions? Excellent. So now we have our administrator report.
And we'll start with Deputy Mark Springer.
So I don't have a lot to report today. We've had kind of a decline in a lot of our communicable disease activity that we've been working on. We're still seeing a little bit of influenza B activity, and that's not unusual for that to occur through April and May. No institutional outbreaks at this point. We are kind of in the downside of our mumps outbreak. We're still seeing probably 4 to 8 cases that we're evaluating per week. Right now we have 2 schools that are on exclusion. Those are in Central Valley and East Valley school districts, and those will go off at the end of the week. Are there any questions from the board that I can answer?
Questions for Mark? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. I have a few things to share with you today. The first is we were thrilled to be granted a grant from the Kresge Foundation that is called Emerging Leaders in Public Health, where Kresge takes the head of a health department and a younger person in that health department, and you go through an 18-month training and work with them, looking at how we strengthen and advance public health in communities. Myself, along with Helene Dewey out of our health promotion unit, were granted an opportunity to pursue this effort, and we have taken advantage of that. We begin next month with a training, 2-day training. We have the opportunity in an area that we are focusing on, and ours will be health equity. We have an opportunity to apply to Kresge for $125,000 to be applied to this community in that effort. And so we have put together an outline and a budget plan for that, which has been submitted. We have not heard back on feedback on that. We get assistance through the University of North Carolina's School of Public Health. And so we're thrilled to be moving forward with that. It was brought to my attention that that was put in the Journal of Business actually today, that announcement. Also, share with you, and I will pass these around when I sit down, a couple of programs that you have heard about that are moving forward. The Done My Way, which is a tobacco cessation, stop smoking program, is underway. It was launched on April 6th, and since that time there have been over 1,000 hits on our website, with people staying on that page for more than 3 minutes. So people are paying attention to this, and it's people who are trying to stop smoking. The strategy is really what would be called crowdsourcing, and it is sharing stories of people who have successfully quit using tobacco. And so we're excited that it is really starting to move. Our tobacco cessation program is getting this information out to many of the communities that are higher utilizers of tobacco. It's also had very positive media coverage in both print and radio, so we're thrilled to see that that's expanding. And they are distributing campaign materials as well to the YMCAs, the libraries, community centers, and so on, as well as clinics in Spokane County for providers to be able to have additional information for people who are working to stop smoking. Also, our paid reach on Facebook hits over 16,000 unique users. 500 of those have paid attention to the call for action and have actually submitted stories on their successes in quitting smoking. So it's beginning to build. For the unpaid reach, there's about 24,000, and out of that group, 600 people have engaged. So we're seeing really good response to this campaign, so a great deal of credit to the work done in that program. Additionally, there is a program that started a year ago, Weed to Know. It's a marijuana program, and that has now gained more traction. We are looking at a little over 6,900 hits in a year to that site on our website. Right now, there are really new messages that are going out addressing pregnancy issues, and it is under the title of Weed to Know, Baby and You. There's 3 focuses: pregnancy, breastfeeding, and parenting, and the risks that go along with those and marijuana usage. The target on that will be OBGYNs and people who work with families and small children. The effort is also reaching out to marijuana retailers. At this point in time, the campaign has reached 9 of those retailers with materials. There are 33 in total, and we will be continuing to go for all of them. Also in your packet today, you have a piece that looks like this. It's Public Health Code of Ethics. And I think the public testimony from today and the work that we have been doing with the mumps outbreak is exactly the kind of thing that a code of ethics in public health seeks to address and talk about. I have asked Ann to also put on the Public Health Board site a piece off of the internet called from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy about public health ethics, that goes into depth about the challenges that you face in looking at how does public health that is treating an entire population balance that risk to personal risk. And it goes into great depth in discussing that, looking at overall benefit, collective action and efficiency, fairness on the distribution of burden, the harm principle, and paternalism. So would encourage you to also look on your website for the Board of Health page. That will be posted there today or tomorrow. Also, just an update on the building. As I had mentioned to you before, we will be replacing our chillers, which are the devices that help keep us cool in the summer, our air conditioning system. We have awarded a contract to Johnson Controls. We went out to bid on that. They came in both as the least expensive and fully meeting the RFQ. So that work will start in the next several weeks. We hope to have it culminated sometime in September Unfortunately, because the unit will sit behind our building, we have to take down 2 trees that are behind our building in order to be able to put it there. Hopefully, we'll be able to do some replanting once all of the machinery and stuff is put in there. Also, wanted to just give you a heads up on the violence report that you heard about. There's been a delay in more fully rolling that out. We had a call from Sheriff Ozzie, who wanted to speak about some issues that he felt didn't fully represent some of the data. And when he sat down with us, we understood exactly what he was talking about. If you looked at a trend that we were showing on certain kinds of criminal activity, what it appeared is that over the last 10 years, that criminal activity had accelerated. However, when he came over and said, you really need to look at this in the context of 20 years, because if you recognize when crime check calling went away, we saw this enormous increase. When we used to have crime check, the numbers were low, but then when we discontinued that, they went up. If you went back the other way, you could see exactly the opposite of that curve. So recognizing the impact of having a crime check call-in mattered. And so we have gone back to extend the period of time to show the trend of what has happened over that 20-year period as opposed to just the last 10. Yes. These were property crimes. And so we'll show that whole trend in the report now to show when crime check was in place, was not in place. And this was brought to our attention by the sheriff that we weren't showing a full enough perspective of what appeared to be a 10-year curve just showing an increase.
So, if I may.
Yes.
It might be useful to us to compare the city of Spokane with Sheriff Ozzie's stats, just so we get kind of a full picture. And I don't know that I think they might be different.
Well, in the data that he showed us, he actually also broke it out by the city of Spokane, Spokane Valley, unincorporated, and the county. So the data that he gave us was over all of those different breakouts.
Okay.
The point that I'm making, though, is that we postponed putting out what we had because he was able to bring data and show to us that we could go back and validate and then represent a bigger time spread than we had.
Compare the two, just to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Yes, and I believe that is being done.
But you're saying to make sure that we talk to our police department as well as this.
Yes.
And the other thing, I think you might have said it backwards, maybe not.
Perhaps.
It's when crime check went away, crime went down. When it got replaced, it went up. Because when it went away, there was no way to report it. When it got back, everyone was reporting it.
Yes, thank you. That's what I had intended to say. Yes. So it was a matter of, are you getting the reports or not? So, in any event.
Hang on, Tony. Lori?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yes.
Could you talk, I want to go back to the smoking cessation.
Yes.
And was it just tobacco, or was it anything with nicotine?
Just tobacco.
The tobacco, yes.
So it wasn't people who are addicted to nicotine gum or chew or
No.
anything? Okay.
A piece of data that I wanted to share with you out of the violence report that has been particularly alarming, I think, to us as we've looked at it, is that if we look over the past decade in Spokane County, there have been 50,000 child abuse incidents. That equates to 5,400 per year, or about 15 child abuse incidents every day in this county. That's as of 2015 data. Very alarming. Additionally, with the partners of the county, the City of Spokane, Empire Health Foundation, and Providence, there has been a quality of life survey done. That is now online. You can find it at qolspokane.org. It comes to our website. And you can look at the information about that quality of life report. What we do know is that we got a great return, 28% return on this survey. So that was 3,200 surveys that were returned. So this is very statistically significant. We know, obviously, that there's a strong linkage between health and quality of life, the perception. We know that for persons who see themselves as having good health, so either good or very good health, 68% recorded their quality of life as being very good. For those with rankings themselves as having poor health, only 31% determine their quality of life is good. So you can tell that health has an enormous impact. In terms of inequity, and this will be what Helene and I will be working on, the data shows that only 47% of Pacific Islander, Alaska Natives, and 20% of Black identified quality of life as excellent or very good. It's clear that a higher quality of life is associated with good income, education, and employment. But something that stood out as well in the report is if you look at two neighborhoods that are very close together, Comstock residents were almost twice as likely to report a high quality of life compared to Cliff and Cannon area, which are not very far apart. So it really drives a lot of question about why is that? What is it that this difference is caused by? We will be doing this quality of life survey again with the same partners this year, and then it is anticipated that it will be done every 2 years thereafter, because it gathers data that many of our other data sources do not have, and that will then be available for the community to utilize. So I will pass around as well a piece of what our draft pieces for the Weed to Know campaign, just for you to get a chance to see what is coming. Those are not yet finalized, but I'll pass those around with the Done My Way pieces as well. Could I answer any other questions?
Questions for Torney?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is our legislative report. Linda.
So good afternoon. As I'm sure all of you know, the regular session ended on April 23rd, and a special session started the next day. The focus obviously is on getting the operating budget finished. A couple of things we're really focused on in public health are the foundational public health services work, obviously, and also the Tobacco 21 bill. I put an update in your packet of where all the other bills have landed. I just have a few highlights. On the foundational public health services, that the House version of that got out of the House but stalled in the Senate Ways and Means Committee. But we do have $40 million in the House budget. If you recall, the original request from Public Health was $60 million in funding. At this point, we are going to go with the $40 million in the House budget and just focus on retaining that amount at this point. For the Tobacco 21, accompanying that is a tax on vape products. And it's very likely that the Tobacco 21 is not going to pass unless we have the revenue offset from the tax on the vaping products. While these bills didn't even make it out of the House, they are still in play in regards to the budget because they have the impacts on the budget. For substance abuse, House Bill 1427, this really focuses on opioids. There are several provisions from other bills that got wrapped into this bill. And so those things that are now included include prescription restriction provisions, as well as some things around the prescription monitoring program and who can access the data. House Bill 1411, the dental licensure and residency program, is now with the governor for signature. And Senate Bill 5540, which is about an oral health pilot program. It looks like this may actually be in play in the special session just because of where it's kind of traveled at this point. And then lastly, Senate Bill 5282, distracted driving, that finally passed the legislature. It's been a few years that we've been trying to get that through, and it's now with the governor for signature. So, any questions on those?
Questions for Linda?
Just have a comment, Linda. It's always very helpful, all this information, but I think as we go farther down the session, it would be helpful if you maybe had a highlight of things that were still alive, because there's just a lot of content here, and so sort of just a little highlight.
Yeah, basically anything that doesn't say likely dead is still in play.
Yeah, but if you did it the opposite as we got to the
Okay.
end, so that I could look to there first and go,
And I can just sort them out and pull everything that's out of play down to the bottom.
Yeah.
Sure. Thanks. Anything else?
Any other questions?
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Next is our comptroller report. Mike.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to give you an update on a couple things I reported on last month. One, we started our Profix budgeting software. We kicked it off about a week ago on Monday, and so it's been a week and a half of intense, them learning about our account code structure and us learning about their software system. And after much back and forth and working on both from both sides of the company and our implementation team here, as of yesterday, it was pulling in our data out of our GP payroll, our GP financial, and our NovaTime timekeeping system and putting it into their system, everything from 2013 to current. So it's on pace of moving forward to really having a really good budgeting tool that we can use forward and use our historic data moving forward. So that was a great thing. And it might just be exciting to a finance guy like me, but that was a great. When yesterday it came through and said it was 100% successful on all account codes, that was a good day for me. The next thing was our auditors. I reported last month that the auditors were going to be arriving April 3rd. The lead auditor did show up, was here for about 3 days, and then got pulled off to another audit. Now they've rescheduled where they're going to come next week on May 1st, I believe it is, and they're going to start. They're bringing the team in, but they're going to split it in half. They're going to do half the audit to begin with, maybe be back as late as in July to do the second part of the audit because of their timing and their scheduling. And so I just want to make sure that you know, since I said it was going to start in April, that we probably won't be getting an exit report until late summer. So just so you know that it's going on, but there's no issues happening just at the moment. So any questions as far as finance?
Questions for Mike?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Action item, or I'm sorry, not action items. Item 8, consent agenda, consisting of the meeting minutes from March 30th, 2017, and our March vouchers. Do I have a motion on the consent agenda today?
Yes. Yes. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next are our action items. Our first item is Resolution 1703, adopting the Board of Health communication policy, presented by Patricia Rhodes.
This was handed out last
month. Right.
So Patricia is here to answer any questions you may have.
So, Patricia, would you just quickly remind the board what this is, just for the record, and then if we have any questions, we can address that to her.
Sure. So, as a public health department, we're required to retain records, and they include text messages, emails, and so this policy is that Board of Health members will not text at all to each other or to members of the health department when it comes to Board of Health business or SRHD business, and that that's basically the gist of the policy, and that the emails will be captured either in your own system, whether it be a county or a state system, or that if you're a appointed citizen, that we'll figure out a method for capturing those.
Do we have any questions? Mike?
So I understand that with the public records. I guess what I'm foggy on is why is text a big issue, but we can make as many voice phone calls as we want?
Well, you'd have to ask the state that, because they're the ones that make those laws. Voice does not have to be captured, but because text messages are written, it is a method that we have to keep and track those.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion on Resolution 1703 as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. Discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next is Resolution 1704, approving of the Spokane Regional Health District Title VI Non-Discrimination Plan and authorizing the Board of Health Chair to sign the Title VI Non-Discrimination Certificate. That's also Patricia.
So basically, anytime an agency receives federal funds, whether they're a recipient or a subrecipient of those funds, you need to have in place the Civil Rights Act Title VI requirements. And as part of that, we needed to create a Title VI non-discrimination plan, which we have done, and we've incorporated pieces of the City of Spokane, or the STA's plan, their public participation and their language pieces that we've pulled out. They've done good surveys on those, and we were able to utilize those and reference them within our plan. Another requirement is that we have our oversight board sign the certificate that says we will follow these requirements.
Any questions for Patricia on this? Thank you. Do I have a motion on Resolution 1704 as presented?
I'll make a motion to that effect.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Resolution 1704 is passed unanimously. Thank you all, and that moves on to item 10, reports. Our report today is What Are We Doing About the Opioid Epidemic by Julie Albright and Matt Layton.
My apologies, Dr. Layton could not be here today. He had a family emergency. So, one of the things I want to talk about first is, does anybody know when, opioid addiction started in the United States?
1700s?
Close. You're really close, actually. That's probably the closest one I've been. 1800s, during the Civil War. So that was 1861 to 1865. And the reason for that was the use of morphine for amputations, things like that. Also, the men that came around, the snake oil men that had opioids in their bottles of stuff that they would sell to women for premenstrual cramps, for migraine headaches. So what happened with that is they called it the crazy woman's disease. So there was a lot of sympathy, because when people try to go off of it, they go through withdrawals, and they just called it being crazy. So with that, it wasn't until the early 1900s when the stigma started, and that's when we had an influx of immigrants into the country. And they couldn't get jobs. And so that's when the opioids went to the gangs, things like that. There was buying and selling of it. And then we come to the early does anybody know when methadone started? Or who started it? So there's two rules of thought. Well, one is it comes from Germany. And the thought is that Hitler made it for his troops because we cut off his supply of morphine. But with that being said, it came to the United States in the early 1950s. Again, for women with premenstrual cramps and for menopausal, because it wasn't addictive. But they did find out it was addictive. And so what happened is, and there was a lot of research on it, and they found that it worked for people with heroin addiction. Drs. Neiswander and Dole did a lot of research on it. In the 60s, it became a public health issue. Over 100,000 people died from heroin overdose. So that's where the public health issue comes into effect. And when they first started dispensing methadone, it had to be out of a hospital. Deaconess Hospital was the first place that dispensed methadone. And then it went to YFA, and then it came to the health district in 1990. So it's been here ever since. I call it Spokane's best kept little secret because of that. In 2008, the program here had 256 patients, and 156 of those were Medicaid. Go fast forward to today, and we have 920 patients, and 750 are Medicaid. We open up at 5:30 in the morning for our workers, and they come in from 5:30 in the morning till 7:45, and then at 8 o'clock, our regular dosers come in. And then we dose until 11:30. But with that being said, with the influx of patients, we are also going to be extending our hours. When people come in, they just don't receive methadone. What they also, and some of them do receive buprenorphine, which is a partial agonist. And we started doing that in July of last year. So we have 2 medications that we use. Also, when people come in, they receive counseling. It's a requirement. They have to have substance use disorder counseling. All of our counselors are bachelor's, master's degree counselors, and they carry their chemical dependency professional license. What we're doing to help this second epidemic is we also brought on board Dr. Layton. It'll be 3 years in July. He came to start working with us. So we had psychiatry also. Also, with that being said, we also now have 2.5 ARNPs that are also on staff, as well as with 13 counselors. And then our dispensary assistants, because all of our patients are also on for urinalysis, so we can see what else is in their system when they come in, which is a federal regulation. This program is also very regulated. The DEA comes in and regulates us, this county, the state, the pharmacy board, and the federal government. What I'd like to do is pass out to you also something that we do as part of our diversion policy. Anybody that receives any medication from their physician, or they go to the hospital and they receive medication, they have to bring that in and log that in. So when they have a urinalysis and it shows what their drug is that's in their system, we know what that is. And also we're watching for diversion. So if they get a prescribed narcotic, what happens is we want to make sure they're taking it as prescribed, or if they get a benzodiazepine, or if they have alcohol in their system. Because if you mix an opioid and alcohol or a benzodiazepine, that's life-threatening. It can kill somebody. So we don't want that to happen. Also, we don't want the methadone or the buprenorphine that we hand out, that we dispense out in the community. So we use a cherry-flavored, red-colored liquid is what we dispense. When they go to a physician and receive methadone, it's in a pill form. And when you hear about people dying of methadone, it's a pill form that they've received out in the community. We haven't had anybody yet that's died with methadone from our clinic. And one of the things we do is we have these bottles. Oops, excuse me. And all of our bottles have a seal on them. So it's a pressure seal. So when they get medication in the bottle for a take-home, to take home on a Sunday, or they work up to steps, it has a seal. And they're also, all of our individuals are on a callback system. So when they get a callback, they have to bring in all their bottles of medication, plus any medications they get in the community, leave a urinalysis, and be checked. So this seal has to be intact. So it has to be able to be pulled off. So it shows that they haven't been selling. Yeah, no, go ahead.
When you said we haven't had any methadone deaths yet, that begs the question, why would you die from methadone if you're dispensing it?
Why would one of our individuals?
Yes.
So that they get other out in the community, that they're taking too much. And the reason why is I say they're taking too much. Maybe they take 2 of their carries, so we want to make sure that they're mentally stable to handle having a dose in their possession. What methadone does is it builds on itself. So when somebody's out in the community and receives methadone from a physician, they don't understand, and most usually a physician doesn't also educate them about it. When somebody's used to taking oxys or oxycodone or hydrocodone for their pains, maybe a broken arm, back injury that they've had, they take that medication and it's about a 2 to 3 hour half-life. And so they take more of it. Or some people, if they have an addiction, they take more of it. But it doesn't kill them because the half-life and it goes through your system so quickly. Methadone will stay in your system 24 to 72 hours. So they take their dose, that's given to them, maybe out in the community. They get 3 10-milligram pills 3 times a day. But it also takes a while for for you to feel the effect. So what happens with that is they take that, but they're still not feeling the effect, so they take more of it. But it takes a while to get through the system, so they've taken that and then they take more, and then they overdose and die. With methadone, when they first come into our program, federal law is we can only give 30 milligrams of it on the first day. They come in the next day, get 40 milligrams, but half a day one's still in your system. So in your system, you're really getting 55 milligrams of it, because you're getting 40, and then about 15 milligrams is still in your system, so you're getting 55. Day 3, you get 50 milligrams of it. You still have half a day 2 in your system, and a little bit of day 1 in your system. So we really watch the individuals that come in for overdose and sedation with that. The other piece is what we're doing to help with the heroin or the opioid that's out in the community, the epidemic, is we've been working with the gel, and now we're gel dosing. So anybody who's on any pregnant woman that goes in, they call us, we go over and do an assessment and an intake over there. And then we also, any of our patients that go to jail because of old warrants, they don't go to jail because of their warrants, because they're afraid they won't be dosed, and so their stability will go. So they call us now, and we go over and we do gel dosing over there. We also go up to the hospital. I've had 2 calls last night for people that they know have heroin addiction. And so we go up and we dose, we do their intakes, get them ready for when they come here, and then they come in and they start dispensing with us. The other thing is that I also want you to realize that, like in today's newspaper, it had methadone overdoses, or meth overdoses surge, and they also talk about the opioids. But what they do is they take the opioids and the opiate, and they take and put them out for these numbers. But I also want you to kind of look at it as an ingredient label with sugar. Sugar they can take and separate out, so maybe the first ingredient should be sugar because of all the sugars in it and the percentage of it is. The opiate and opioids all do the same thing to you. So with all these deaths, they have them separated out with heroin, oxycodone, hydrocodone, other opiates, morphine, methadone. That's all the narcotics. And they should all be put together, but they're wanting you to know what different medications people are getting out in the community. So really the deaths for 2015 was 85 for the opioids and 104 in 2016. So I just want you to realize that when you see this kind of stuff out in the newspaper. And I know I'm probably close on time. The Surgeon General did write, over 40% of these with individuals with a substance use disorder also have a mental health condition. Fewer than half, 48%, receive treatment for either disorder. So one of the things we're doing also, that we're going to be getting our mental health licensing. So we will also be able to have mental health in our facility for our individuals that have both opioid addiction and a mental health issue. What I'd also like to pass out is just a booklet that I have of different information on opioid use and for our clinic. Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
I just have a quick one. When you talk about, what you say, about 920 patients presently, is there an average age that you're seeing?
When I first started working here in 2006, the average age was about 40. So a person would come in at the age of 40, and their primary drug of choice was heroin at that time. Now, when we look at our data, it's usually somebody in their early 20s to 30s. And they've started off with pain medication, and then they go to the heroin because they can't get the pain medication as readily on the streets anymore. So it also used to be that the deaths from the opioids, from pain medication, was going up, but now that's coming down, but the deaths from heroin is going up.
Mike. What's the, I guess, the end result with the methadone clinic? Is it to get them off of methadone, or are they stuck on that for the rest of their life? And you're just helping them through counseling and different things?
So one of the things is, with opioids, it's way different than any other kind of, it's different than methamphetamine, alcohol, cocaine. All of us carry in us what's called a mu receptor, an opioid receptor. So when somebody becomes dependent on the opioid, your natural receptor sites, it's like when you hit your thumb, stub your toe, what happens is it hurts. That opioid receptor takes over, it quits hurting. With the dependency, you grow more receptor sites in your brain and in your gut. So that natural can't fill that up anymore. So that's why somebody needs the drug, is to fill those up. When that drug is taken away, they go in with withdrawals. About 30 days, you can get over those physical withdrawals, but the psychological is still there. The craving's huge. Those receptor sites are never going to go away. So that when they come under our program, some people will be able to taper down and off. Some people will have to stay out the rest of your life. And one of the things with the ones who taper down and off, we do a relapse prevention plan with them. And one of the things is if somebody goes in and has any dental work or any operations, anything, and they get a narcotic, one thing that can happen is it can re-wake those receptor sites up, and then they'll have to maybe come in for maintenance because they'll be off and going again. It's something that they'll have for the rest of their life. That's why they call it a brain disease.
So you said that methadone's addictive also, but is it less addictive then, or is it because you're managing it and keeping them dosed that they don't go through the withdrawals?
It's because we're managing it. And that's what we want. We don't want anybody high on it. We just want it so that their craving's gone and so that they can go back out and go to work, go to school, take care of their children.
Okay, thank you.
Julie, if I may, I think
Sure.
one of the issues, Mike, also with respect to methadone versus, for example, hydrocodone, oxycodone, is that when you look at drug half-lives, if you have a drug that has a very short half-life, you get a quick fix, and then you're looking for more. So when you're looking at methadone, which has a very long half-life, the mu receptors are saturated, and therefore that opiate is released more slowly, so you don't have that constant need of medication. So, and then again, just the other thing, it's interesting for me over the years where, again, when in my training, use of opiates was very commonly practiced. It was kind of like, these are pain medications, and we need to address people's pain. And as a physician, that's something that we were sort of taught. You have to address their needs, and pain is a need, and you address it. As we've realized that it's no longer such a function of that it's a weakness, but rather we're seeing that opioid addiction is truly a chronic disease, I think there's been a lot greater emphasis on providers not providing those medications, because then we just sort of feed that uploading or upregulation of mu receptors that really just sort of makes the addiction even worse.
Thank you, Dr. Lutz.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So at this time, we will have an executive session for the board for legal guidance pursuant to RCW 4230-110-1I, which is related to real estate, with personnel.
Now it's enforcement, action, and litigation.
So how long do you think, Counselor?
I think 15 minutes should do it.
So we will adjourn our meeting and go into executive session at 1:40 and return at 1:55? 1:55. Oh, well, that's 35. I'm sorry. Wow, that's terrible, Kevin. 1:35 to 1:50. Sorry, everybody. Okay, so we're good to go. All right, so we will resume our regular session at 1:50. We are moving into board member check-in. We can begin with Ms. Stratton.
So I want everybody to know, can you hear me?
Yes.
when your microphone is on, this red light will be on, as well as a green light down by the button.
Now you're making it hard. Green light.
Both lights will go on.
Oh, I just see the green light.
There you go.
Okay.
But there's no red light up there. Those will both be on.
And now I can turn it off.
Now it's on.
Now it's on. I don't, yeah, thanks to you. I don't have anything to say.
Josh? Lori?
I can't follow that.
Mike? Susan? Chuck?
Nothing.
I have nothing. And Bob?
No, nothing, thank you.
So at this time, with board member check-in completed, our next regular Board of Health meeting is scheduled for May 25th, 2017, and I remind people that the Board of Health meetings are typically broadcast the Tuesdays, 8 p.m., and Wednesdays, 10 a.m., the week following the Board of Health meetings on City Cable 5 and Comcast Channel 5. At this time, is there a motion for adjournment? Second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor of adjournment? Aye. Meeting is adjourned.